But here we are in more London, and it is London but more? Is that the idea? Or less? I want more London, they said. Okay, I'll build it for you out of glass. To the city of London, and this is the kind of ancient heart of the city, this trading capital. We've got this giant shape, which has been described by architecture critics as the walkie-talkie. It is a skyscraper, obviously. What goes on in there? Well, it's offices, and it's designed by an architect called Raphael Vanoli. To the right, we see something called the cheese grater, but it doesn't look like a cheese grater at all. It just looks like a wedge. Doesn't even look like a wedge, just looks like a square. That's by Richard Rogers. And the building to the left is really big. That's about all you can say about it. It's a bit of a mess, frankly. I mean, the idea was that it's a cluster. I mean, in the way that you could, in your kitchen, cluster together a pepper grinder and a pot of salt and a ketchup bottle. I mean, I think here there was an attempt to have a nature of the free market, a nature of property development, and that somehow these things would just sort of cluster together and somehow form something that was just so naturally and effortlessly beautiful. But all of that's lost. You don't really get that vibe from the skyline. I think that's a shame. This is the City Hall. The former London Mayor Ken Livingstone described it as a glass testicle. Boris Johnson described it as a giant gonad. The current Mayor Sadiq Khan, what does he describe it as? Probably describes it as his office. Probably the most fun thing about this building is the fact that you can cycle around it. But what we have here is a building designed by Norman Foster. It's a public building. Within it, on the ground floor, there's a giant satellite map of London. It's really fun. You can walk around on top of it and find your house. And at the very top, there's a huge room called London's living room. And it has a spiral to it. I don't know if you can see this, but there's a spiral on the outside, there's a spiral on the inside. And this spiral goes from the bottom of the building right to the very top. And the idea was that it would be a fully publicly accessible spiral. And effectively this spiral is a symbol of transparency. And funnily enough, Norman Foster had just before this building renovated the Reichstag in Berlin. And he put a spiral in that one too. So spirals were very fashionable back then, but funnily enough, no one builds spirals anymore. Around here is pretty corporate in terms of the offices. It's, I have to say, I don't know the architects who designed them, but I imagine they're the kind of architects who probably don't list these projects on their website anymore. I don't think it's necessarily really showcases the best of contemporary British architecture in any sense. So we're coming up to what I actually think is quite cool, which is London Bridge train station. And this was a multi-billion-pound project, right? They built a train station underneath these railway tracks. We just come in here and have a look. Okay, so we've got some big railway tracks above us, these massive railway tracks. And the trains just kept on running and they built a train station underneath it. What I would say is we're standing here and I can see in front of me a gate line and some escalators and some benches and some cash machines, and I have no idea where I'm supposed to go. Really no indication of which escalator goes where the underground is, where the shops are, where the toilets are. So although it's a massive achievement, I think for me, I think it needs to be about people. I need to feel great when I'm here. I feel good but a bit lost. So there's escalators here, escalators there, benches, pretty cool benches. Oh, I think that's really beautiful. So they've used a kind of concrete formwork pattern to show the timber to echo these cool brick arches. And actually these brick arches are pretty special. It's like being in a crypt of a church. Now we're in the kind of back streets of London Bridge. I always imagine that people from all over the world would come to London Bridge expecting to see something amazing. There really isn't really anything that much amazing to see here. As you can see, this is the vibe of London Bridge. And these streets had, like once upon a time, they'd been docks. And so there'd been like a whole load of boats and wharfs and all that stuff. And then they were all just regenerated. So this is like a story of the last 60 years. To my left is St. Olav House, which is this like amazing kind of Norwegian-inspired structure. I think it's a hospital or something now, built on the site of a church. And then to the right is the Shard. The Shard. So this is about 309 meters high. It's the currently the tallest building in the UK. Designed by the Italian architect Renzo Piano, who famously sketched it on the back of a napkin during a meal in Berlin with Irvin Seller, the man who built the building. they always famously described it as a city, a vertical city. And I would say there are many things I like about the Shard. I like the fact that when you're in South London, in Peckham or wherever, you can see the Shard, then you know, oh, that's London Bridge over there. So I think it's put London Bridge on the skyline to a certain extent, but a vertical city it certainly isn't. There's one bar in there, about halfway up, you can go up there. I think a drink, I paid £6.50 for an orange juice there. What kind of a city is that? I mean, you know, some cities like Edinburgh have got a massive mountain where you can just walk up there and see everything. Here you have to pay £25 to go in the viewing platform. So this is mad. This is Southwark Bridge, on a Minerva house. Minerva, the I think the god of wisdom, a big owl with his eyes looking down. I don't really see any owl in this, but I see the most postmodern building of our journey so far. Look at those upturned arches. Look at that verticality. It's not even a skyscraper, but it's reaching for the stars. We see black tinted glass, a nod to the 1980s Las Vegas boom. We see a tiny tree. The tree is tiny as it should be in compared to the building, made to make the building look even bigger. This is the Southwark Cathedral, my favourite cathedral in London. So you can see we're on the south bank of the River Thames. This is the remains of Winchester Palace. So there's St Paul's Cathedral, and you can see the whole thing. You can see the big dome, the little bits, and in front of it, these slightly lower buildings. And the idea there was that they wanted to replicate the height of the old historic buildings, so that what we see now is roughly what everybody always saw over the last 300 years of that cathedral being there. What I also really love about this is the Millennium Bridge. So this bridge was like one of those many things to celebrate the fact that we reached the year 2000. Famously it wobbled. Sadly I never went on it when it wobbled. Did you ever go on it when it wobbled? Yeah. I think actually nowadays people's perception of reality has changed so much. I don't think anyone would mind if the bridge wobbled, but in the year 2000 that was a big deal, the fact that the bridge wobbled, and that was considered totally unacceptable, and a lot of money was spent fixing it. Although technically it wasn't dangerous in any way, it was just a little disconcerting. We live in such disconcerting age now that a mere wobbling bridge is the last of anybody's worries. Next stop we got here is a big old power station. And obviously this was built later on. This is very much of the 20th century, very Art Deco by this Giles Gilbert Scott, the kind of great 20th century architect, but also very much a kind of dynastic architect. In fact, came from a family and line of architects. So this building originally would have had a mountain of coal at the front. That's where we are now. Now it's like a lovely little park with some birch trees. When this thing opened, it was probably the most exciting. This was basically the most exciting building in London. I mean, it really captured people's imaginations, and I think it still does. This is the most visited attraction in the country. You can imagine a lot of people would come here and enjoy this spot. You know, this grand ramp here, which is now closed. These exhibitions kind of etched in. Here we go, Steve McQueen, Andy Warhol, in partnership with Bank of America, in partnership with Hyundai, Bloomberg Philanthropists. It's like another world. I can see the leaves, the detritus that's blown in. It's really kind of post-apocalyptic. Next to it we have these towers, the Neo Bankside Towers. They're by Richard Rogers, RSHP, his company, and they're very expensive places. Famously, there's a long-running legal battle between the residents of these homes and the art gallery next door, who claim that people from the art gallery can see inside their homes, and effectively are suing the art gallery, and therefore a judge or somebody has to make a decision about what is more important in our present age, the right of the people to enjoy a public amenity, or the right of somebody who invested millions into an overpriced bit of property to experience some privacy. So this has been a test, and hope you've enjoyed it. It's been really fun. Phineas, Harper, Merlin, Fulcher on the road with bikes. Tune in again. Thank you.